26-6. And Keary makes a dart. Gets the ball away to G.I. G.I.'s going to score. He's going to put another nail in the coffin. And the Goanna crawls.
Greg Inglis, one of the greats of the game, has just given us a special moment, a special finish. Put up the try. And South Sydney can now celebrate. You see what it's meant to the players, what it means to the crowd, what it means to the club. The emotional scenes here, enough to make us all cry.
Well done, South Sydney.
So South Sydney victorious after 43 years.
Rugby league is one of Australia's most popular and well-supported sports. Its elite competition, the NRL, was formed in 1998, but can trace its roots back to the New South Wales Rugby League, formed 90 years earlier. In 1908, 9 teams contested that new competition, among them the South Sydney Football Club. Formed at the Redfern Town Hall on the 17th of January 1908, the Rabbitohs would win 21st grade premierships by 1971, the most of any club in the league. Earning the nickname the Pride of the League, a changing market in the early 1990s would threaten South and many of the game's oldest clubs. South Sydney would controversially be axed in the year 2000, setting off a wave of protests and fundraisers that would see the Bunnies return, struggling for many years, but eventually claiming their 21st premiership. Like many rugby league fans, my South Sydney story is one of the highest highs and the lowest lows. This is my story. Glory, glory. On the Strongbows.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers. It's almost like it's the name of the show or something. Hey.
Hit it again.
Yeah, do it again.
It's 10:20 p.m. at the moment, and this was a bad idea. Hey, bring me on the show. What could go wrong?
Hey, is this your first drink tonight?
Yes, I'm drinking I had a beer after we beat the Roosters last week. We'll get into that. I had a beer after we beat the Roosters, and I felt so ill. I'm so low tolerance at the moment. But Strongbow is what got me started on drinking. I started drinking at 19. That was the first thing I had at the dodgiest nightclub in Darlinghurst. And that was an experience that night. Let's leave it at that.
No, because Daniel's got me into Strongbow recently, and I love it.
I got him into it.
Yeah, he got me into Strongbow, and then I got you and Mitch into Strongbow.
Honestly, I was surprised how nice it was to drink, because I didn't drink beer. I didn't drink till I was 19 because I used to have seizures when I was a kid, so I was a bit worried about how I'd react with alcohol. And my parents were like, "Oh, it's cool you're drinking. Here's a case of Strongbow." And then the next night, my friends came over and like, "Oh, it's cool you're drinking. Here's a case of Strongbow." So I had 48 Strongbows. The first week, I was drinking just because I had these Strongbows lying around. I'm like, all right, sweet.
But you know what? It's been ages since, like years, and you haven't gotten sick of it.
No, I honestly, it's still my favorite cider, probably. I'm more of a beer man now. I know I've sort of, before I stopped drinking through lockdown, like as much, I was sort of experimenting with all sorts of different beers, microbrews and stuff. And through the rugby club, we've had different sponsors who had microbreweries, and we, would go there and try out different stuff. I took my girlfriend up to Newcastle or to, I think it was Becolban, stayed at a brewery there and did the tasting and all that sort of thing. And, it's cool. I sort of I drank anything, but I through lockdown, I've not really been drinking that much. I did the zero alcohol beers, which I quite liked, but not a lot of alcohol.
Oh yeah, well, perfect episode to get into it.
Yeah, you guys are going to give me a drinking problem. Thanks.
Wait till the next episode. We're doing absinthe.
Oh, I'm glad I got this episode. I'm glad.
You're in the next one too.
No. Oh, mate.
We're just going to have him on every single day.
Just
3 episodes a day, and we're going to be drinking every...
Oh, man.
Well,
it's like by episode 20, Tony's Blitz.
Mate, by episode, whatever number this is, +1, I'm probably already drunk, by the way. Literally, I'm halfway through this bottle. I honestly want to put the aircon on. The only problem is it's right behind my microphone, so if I do put it on, it's just going to be the sound of outside at night the whole time.
Some good nighttime ambience. I don't mind it.
Oh, yeah, you say that until you want to edit this. then it's a problem. No, I'm an audio engineer, don't forget. I know the struggle, don't worry.
I might need your help.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the best audio engineer. I know you know a few audio engineers are probably a lot better than I am, but I mean, none of them have the dulcet tones of me. I guess that's why you've got me on the podcast.
That's very true, and I'm sure you're better than me.
Probably better than me.
I'd agree.
It's a big coincidence because Strongbow's green and red, and your favorite team is
Green and red.
The Rabbitohs.
Dude, was that?
Yeah, no, it's one time it's completely coincidental, but
Reasons?
I remember, mate, honestly, I remember the bottles were different when I started. Like the designs were different. They weren't like, I think in the UK, Strongbow's like black and gold.
Really?
Here, I guess they just go red with the green bottles. I mean, the green bottles are just to help protect it from UV. I think the red labels are just to look like apple cider, I guess. I don't know. And a lot of different brands, like the color of the bottles, I mean, depending on who you ask, like I think Bilpin and a lot of like the Batlow and the other ones around Sydney use the brown bottles. They're all supposed to be different characteristics for preventing deterioration and stuff. But I mean, it does play into the brand. But to me, it looks like a Heineken almost.
Ah, yeah.
Oh.
I didn't know bottles were green, like the alcohol bottles were green to stop the UV light. That's really interesting.
I think like a lot of ales use the brown because the ales can be a bit more sensitive because I think they're treated or they're preservatived less. Whereas the lagers, I think people are used to fairly high carbs and fairly high preservative stuff because they sit around for ages. But the ales, I think, need a bit more protection. Like I know Newcastle Brown because I used to drink Newcastle Brown every now and then from England, not Newcastle up here. But yeah, they had brown. Crown lager, I think, and maybe even like Carlton Draft and VB, I think, are brown.
Yeah.
Bottles for the bottles and the long necks and stubbies and stuff. It's all just preference. Like Corona's clear, and Corona lasts ages, even though it's supposedly imported. So
Interesting. It makes you think what's in it.
Exactly, yeah.
No wonder it tastes like
mate,
this.
mate, how do you ship something from Mexico apparently to Australia? Not exactly the coolest or, the least humid countries in the world, it must be said, and not have it like go bad. Like there's obviously stuff in it, but that's part and parcel of modern stuff.
True. Everything's got preservatives or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess like no better place to start than for you to jump into how you became a Rabbitoh supporter.
I mean, I didn't have much choice, let's be honest. So my father was always a lifelong Rabbitohs fan. He was at their grand finals when he was old enough through like the 60s and 70s and stuff. And that was because when my family moved from Lebanon, or my grandparents moved from Lebanon, they lived in Redfern. And for those who don't know, the Lebanese flag's red and green. And there's a team in Redfern that play in red and green back then called the South Sydney Rabbitohs. So they supported them. And there were a lot of Lebanese in Redfern, so I guess a lot of them probably had the same story. Dad was a massive fan. He had me at 38 with my mum, who was also from Erskineville, which is also South Territory. And I had very little choice in the matter of who I was going to support because I'm pretty sure I literally came straight out of my mum into a South Sydney jersey by the time I was like a few days old. And this was, I guess what every father wants their son to be is like, if they're into footy, they want him to be a footballer and stuff. And that's going to come into the story a bit later. But I do have a little show and tell, and I'll show you guys on webcam. I printed a match report in the first ever game I attended as a child. Now, Daniel knows my birthday. This was less than a month after I was born. I was at a South Sydney football game. Daniel, I have to tell you officially, I have been going to football games since before you were conceived.
Wow.
Wow.
This was a match in the 1994 Winfield Cup, the tobacco company, run by the New South Wales Rugby League still. And it was the South Sydney Rabbitohs 10 lost to the North Sydney Bears 32.
Wow.
So you had Jason Taylor running around for the Bears, and the players a note for South really. Darren Trindle, who played about 10 years with us, went to the Bulldogs and then basically retired. David Penner, who Daniel should know, played for the Eels as a halfback. Paul Mellor played for South, that was ages ago. John Elias, and that's about it. Bears had Sean Hoppy, Greg Florimo, Ivan Cleary, the current coach of Penrith.
Wow.
I think didn't mention Jason Taylor at the halfback. He kicked a measly 4 from 6 that day. Really poor for Jason Taylor. Guys like Gary Larson, Mario Fennick, Billy Moore. I mean, those were the old days. It was 13,703 people at the Sydney Football Stadium in Moore Park.
That's amazing.
And that was the first game I attended before you were conceived, Daniel. Let me just, you know how people say, oh yeah, I've been doing so-and-so since you was a stain in your mum's panties, even before then, Daniel.
Oh, God. I've never heard that one.
Yeah, before you were conceived.
Well, it shows you how old it is when it's the Bears playing.
Yeah, and the Bears finished second that year.
Wow.
And I think the next few years they made like prelim finals. And within 10 years, they're gone from the first grade.
This was still when
94 Canberra beat Canterbury. Mal Meninga's last game, scored an intercept try at the end. It's a pretty good moment.
Wow.
But that was the last premiership Canberra won. They still had guys like Brett Mullins and stuff back then. They were a really good team, but man, the 90s were not. Oh, we can get into that if you want later, but it could be a few episodes of the 90s and what went wrong. But
that would be a great topic.
I just started getting into NRL. I watched it when I was like 12 or something, probably for the first time. Or maybe a little younger, maybe when I was in primary school, year 5 or something. That's the first time I watched it. Never really got into it much up until the last few years, really. So I've been watching it on and off. I think this year is probably when I've been watching more than usual. It still hasn't been much. So my question to you would be, what makes you love the game so much?
Well, I'll tell you what makes me love NRL so much. It was not being in it and not having a normal childhood because of some infighting and some politicking, and that really, I think, galvanized a lot of people, as I was alluding to with the 90s. Basically, 94 was the last year of peacetime football and rugby league. The next season, they brought in a bunch of new clubs, and pay TV launched in Australia, and there was a big tussle between Optus and Telstra, and became Foxtel and Fox Sports, fighting over the rights. And basically, the long and short of it is, by 1997, we have 2 competitions. You have 12 teams in the ARL, the Optus Cup, and you have 10 teams in Super League, the Telstra Cup. So if you want to, that's pretty much the billboard there. It's basically a fight between Rupert Murdoch and Kerry Packer. Kerry had been involved in the World Series cricket fights back in the 70s. And Rupert Murdoch, probably most known for the Premier League and the NFL rights in the US a few years prior. When they did those split seasons, the game basically dropped dead because fans were split, clubs were split, players were split. A bunch of Canterbury players went to Parramatta to stay in the ARL and stay loyal. A bunch of Parramatta players jumped to Canterbury to get the better pay in Super League. They shook hands at a table in 1998 and then immediately went 14 clubs, that's it. We want 14 clubs by the year 2000. And that's probably the time that I started having, or where I remember most was 99, which was this sort of threshold year. So by that time, St George and Illawarra had merged the Steelers and the Dragons to make St George Illawarra. There were rumblings about Western Suburbs and Balmain and Canterbury and Penrith and Parramatta and all these teams and who's going to merge next, and North Sydney and Manly. So you get to the end of 99. Basically, the writing was on the wall for South just because the NRL had decided on this 14 teams. South said, we are not merging. We're a foundation club. We're not going to do it. A bunch of other clubs said, we can't afford to be out of first grade. We're going to merge. So that's where you get the West Tigers. Western Suburbs Magpies merged with Balmain Tigers. You had the very short-lived Northern Eagles, who were North Sydney Bears and Manly. And basically the NRL said to South, yeah, you guys aren't playing in 2000. We went to court. So I started kindergarten in 2000. So I started primary school or elementary school if you're watching from the US or anything like that. And I didn't have a football team to support. Now, as a 5-year-old with a lot of social issues, that was crippling. I didn't have a team to watch on TV. I didn't have a game to get excited about. I was basically, I guess, excommunicated by the NRL, as many fans of many teams were. And South fought, and I have some results. They played some fundraiser games at Redfern Oval, drew 20,000 to Redfern Oval to beat the USA Tomahawks on tour, 82 points to 12, which rivaled the preliminary final, I think, for the NRL just down the road at Moore Park. And then the next week they played Lebanon, again, my country of heritage, beat them 42 points to 24 on their warm-up for the Rugby League World Cup in 2000. A distant relative of mine played, or cousin of Dad's, I think, Chris Salem, who became the Lebanese Cedars' top try scorer in their short history since 97. Also got himself sent off in like 5 seconds against Ireland in a qualifier, but that's another story for another time.
Oh, wow.
Basically, South were on their own, and they were fighting and fighting. And as a kid, you don't know the details. You get what your dad tells you and stuff, but we kept fighting. And I remember, I was always like, I got to just pick a team in the NRL. I can't just not have it footy. And also, I should mention, in 2000, I've just turned 6, or turning 6, so I can start playing sport, I couldn't play rugby league because there's no South, so why would I play rugby league? I played soccer for 3 years. I was awful. I scored 0 goals as a defender and midfielder. I scored 1 goal, which was an own goal while I was goalkeeping for Concord Junior.
Nice.
That was the nature. It was, well, there's no South in rugby league, so why would you play rugby league? Who are you going to play for? Sydney Roosters? Don't get me started. It's I'm not going to go play for Balmain because if I end up becoming a footy player, I'm going to play for the West Tigers. Like, they're not South.
Right.
Anyway, July 7th or July 8th, oh, my memory's getting hazy. 2001, we get a decision in court. The NRL says, we're not going to fight you anymore. We're reinstating you. And by this point, we'd been to about 1 or 2 rallies, including one that had 80,000 people marching through the streets of Sydney. And when I say the streets of Sydney, I mean George Street, the previous main street of the city. We'd done all these fundraiser games at Redfern, and then they'd gone and played teams in Gosford and Maitland and stuff and put on these things. And, at those games, you weren't just seeing South fans. You were seeing Parramatta fans. You were seeing Balmain fans, West fans, North fans. Billy Moore, who I mentioned in the North Sydney Bears thing, when they merged, he jumped to us and basically became a player for us when we were out of the comp. Wow. He played a few games, a few fundraisers for us. And I mean, those are just dark times, and they still scar. You can probably tell they still really hurt. But when we heard that we're getting back in the comp, it was this moment of euphoria, and then realizing, maybe not as a kid, but realizing in hindsight, we have no money. We spent all our money trying to get back in this competition, and we're going to be dead in the water because our cash is dead. So we start going, get your members, get memberships up. Start trying to get some players. We get a bunch of offcuts, and no disrespect to them because they did the best they could. We got a bunch of offcuts from teams, players that teams didn't want, old, young, whatever. We got them. We come back and play the Charity Shield in front of 30,000 people. It's a pre-season match, no premiership points. End up on Channel 9, end up on Fox Sports, South Sydney's first game back, great occasion. We tie 20-all because we miss a long penalty kick on the end, but we draw 20-all, so we retain because we'd won the last one 3 years prior. And then we played the Roosters in 2002, round 1 at SFS, and I think they got 40,000. Yeah, well, we caught 40-6 from the Chooks, our first game back. Yikes. We win a game against Canberra the next week in Canberra, which doesn't say much for how Canberra were back then. Basically, are going to finish the season dead last until Canterbury breach the salary cap and lose 37 points. So we finish second last, just behind the West Tigers and Penrith, if you can believe, who then go on to win the next season. So we were back in the comp, but we had Buckleys of winning anything. So that's what makes you a fan when you are literally at the lowest point of a team and you still find yourself going, I believe in these guys. I believe in this club, and I still remember being happy just to see the jersey on the field, and that's no joke. Like, just to see red and green back in the NRL, because there was nothing like it. I couldn't just change teams. I couldn't, funnily enough, we'll get to a story about the Bulldogs, but I couldn't just change teams. I couldn't just, we watched the Sydney Swans play. Dad was an old South Melbourne fan through some friends before they even moved to Sydney. It wasn't the same. We watched the Rugby Union. The Wallabies were kicking everyone's ass back then in 2000, 2001. It didn't feel the same. Went to West Harbour. We were probably one of the original Random South guys. We got onto ABC TV at Concord Oval watching Wests and Manly, I think, or maybe it was Wests and Easts, who are very similar to the Roosters club in Shute Shield. And I'm like 5 or 6, and I've just punched Dad in the leg because I was shy from the camera. And I've got the clip of Brett Papworth and Jim Maxwell or whoever it was commentating, going, Souths are back playing rugby. Are they good on them? He just cuts away to the player, Philly for now or something. It's like, okay. But we were the random South guy in 2001. So, I mean, we can't really complain. It was like a week after the decision, I think. But that's what makes you appreciate a footy club. I think a lot of, and this is, I don't want to get into the Roosters too much, but one of the reasons I think a lot of South fans can't stand the Roosters is they've never really had those lows. There's a lot of clubs out there that had free passes in the 90s that have always been successful in some way or another. We feel like we are the super battlers. We feel like everything was hard to get. We've never had money. Haven't had the talent for, at that time, 30 something years. We haven't had a premiership or even gotten close. South was all we had, We used to go to church on Saturdays and go to South games on Sundays, and that was our family. And that was what we used to do.
And you literally built yourself up from scratch, from literally being out of the competition to now, okay, we don't have the money, but now we can build back. So how did you feel in 2014, I believe?
Well, you don't get to 2014 without going back to 2006, because we won 2 or 3 wooden spoons when we came back in the comp.
Wow.
And Russell Crowe, our guardian angel, and I will say, when you say we've built up from the bottom, we've had some help. He was pouring money into the club when we came back. He put a lot of money in during the fight back and even before we got kicked out. And he turned around and said, look, if I'm going to keep feeding you guys money, I at least want to have a say in the operations. Probably the best thing that could have happened was us privatising the club, because from what I understand, we always had problems in our boardroom. We always had behind the scenes issues with directors and stuff, to the point that I think even when we were kicked out, a bunch of our legal team said, look, we can't fight this. You're done. We just fold the club, go home and leave it die. Well, if we listen to them, we're not having this conversation right now. Yeah. 2006, we won 3 games all season. We beat the eventual premiers in Origin, which is not surprising because the Broncos always lost in Origin. Oh. We beat Penrith and Canberra at the back end in rainy weather that I wasn't even at the games for, but I was at the Brisbane game. Won 3 games all season. It's the worst game of rugby league I've ever watched. We lost to New Zealand 66-0. We turn around in 2007 and we finish 7th. We've made the finals for the first time since 1989. And that was probably the moment that we should have realised we had something here. And we'd been on ABC because they'd done the South Side Story documentary, and there was a bit more, peeling the curtain back of the club and showing the rebuilding process and starting to believe. But then we lose to Manly week 1, fair enough. They end up being runners-up to the Cheetahs, the Storm. And that's completely fine for me to say because it's been proven.
Yeah.
2008, very little of note. 2009, very little of note. I think 2010 or maybe 2009, they were a game short of the finals and needed results to go their way. They didn't. But then we hit 2012 and we finished in, I think, the top 4. I just want to get my dates right. We lose to Melbourne in Melbourne week 1, so we have to go play Canberra at home. We beat them easily. I remember that match. So before we get to finals week 3, this is so tangential. I'm so sorry.
Dude, this is amazing. It's like truly telling the story of, the legacy of Rabbitohs. And speaking of Russell Crowe,
super interesting.
It's like literal the movie Gladiator coming to life. Russell Crowe fighting.
Yeah. What a surprise you go there. But the thing is, I think these stories have been told many times. I think the club's releasing a documentary for 20 years since reinstatement anyway.
Wow.
I will just touch on, and I'll rewind a bit. So we're at finals week 3. South Sydney are going to be playing Canterbury for a place in the grand final in 2012. So I'll jump back to 2006-ish because my cousins are Canterbury fans. South are wooden spooners, as I said. They're broke. Nothing's going right for South. Bulldogs have players like Andrew Ryan, Luke Patton. I think they still had Brent Sherwin, maybe O'Mealy, Mason. This might even be earlier, but they were fans of them. And key for me was Hazem Masri. And this was just after they'd had their own problems with the fans and the crowd trouble. But my cousins started going to games. They started inviting me to come to games just because we're like brothers and sisters. I'm an only child. I've got 2 female cousins and 1 male who's on YouTube, by the way. If you like Pokemon Unite, check out my boy Lusht. He'll love that plug, so make sure you put that one in.
His videos are amazing. His videos are really, really cool.
Hi, guys. No, I'm not going to take the piss out of him. Long story short, I end up becoming a Canterbury fan as well. I adopted him as my second team. And that's why when we get to 2012, when we get to finals week 3, the story gets interesting because 30 minutes into this game, it's like 0-0 or maybe 6-0 or something. It's very close. Adam Reynolds goes down injured, done his hamstring. 30 minutes into the game. And it's this long pause. It's probably like 5-10 minutes or something. It was this really long pause trying to get him off the field. And everyone could see he wasn't going to come back. And he was just starting with South, you know, he'd maybe played a full season, just first grade. And he was the one that scored the try against the Roosters earlier in the season to seal off the win. You can take me now. I've seen it all. That win. And I'm sitting there, and the Bulldogs start getting on a run. And that game, 32 points to 8. Bulldogs win, go to the grand final. And I'm sitting there like a stunned mullet. And that was the moment that I knew that South Sydney was really the team I was always going to hold on to. And that was a big moment for me because I think I tried to rebel, you know, as a rebellious teen against my dad and South and the scourge of this and that. That was the moment I knew I was a South fan for life. I'm going to quickly skip 2013, another good season. We win week 1, beat Melbourne. We're leading 14-6 against Manly in the prelim to make the first grand final in club history since 1971, which was against St George, I think, and before that was Manly. We had a good run then. 14-6 up at halftime. I'm sitting there in the stands, 20-30. Manly go on to face the Roosters in the grand final and lose. That's the second prelim final I've seen South have a great first half in, put one foot in the door to the grand final. And I'm sitting there going, this is just not going to happen for me, is it? I'd been at the 06 prelim final where the Bulldogs were leading the Broncos into the second half and the Broncos turn it on, run the Bulldogs off. My cousin's in tears. I'm upset. We're driving home in my dad's XL, which he's still got to this day.
Wow.
And every speed hump through Camperdown, me and my cousins are getting launched into the ceiling. They really crusher tackled myself. I was at the 2009 prelim, Hazem Masri's last game with my cousin against Parramatta, where Parramatta beat him by like a point or something. I've blocked that memory out.
Hey,
we
nice.
walked out early on Hazem Masri's last game and immediately regretted it because my cousin was in tears and we've gone, we shouldn't have walked out. Anyway, the NRL also learned it wasn't just the players and the jersey and the logo to a lot of people. It was families that had generations of supporters and players who had memories of the club and people who really cared about the club. So when we get onto 2014, there's a bit of not an irony, but a bit of vindication that it was 15 years ago. We play our last game ever at Parramatta Stadium and get beaten by the Eagles, which I remember as a kid standing in my backyard, and I had this thing in my head of, if we win, we'll be in the comp. And of course we lost anyway, it doesn't matter. But from those lows, we get to 2014. We've had 2 prelim losses back to back in pretty sad circumstances. You know, we've got the best team ever. Started 2014, Sam Burgess, our inspirational prop forward, announces he's going to rugby union to try and make the 2015 Rugby World Cup with England, which means this is his last season playing for South. And I remember all the fans were up in arms going, mate, we're done. Our premiership window's closed, etc., etc. And I guess naively I said, you know, to myself and to my dad, I said, Sam's not leaving this club without a premiership. There's no way. He will give his life to get us a premiership. His dad had passed away years earlier from motor neurone disease. And when we signed him from, I think it was Bradford in Super League, I'm a bit hazy on that. Russell, one of the first things Russell did was give his deceased dad a life membership at South as a member. His brothers ended up playing for the club. Luke, Tom, George, and Sam all played for South. Ended up, I think, in 2013, funnily enough, all being in the team and on the field for a game. And then we start off 2014 pretty well. And there's a few key games I'm going to point out too because I've got stories for all of them. We play Manly at the SCG. Now, I mentioned my dad's Hyundai Excel. The least reliable car in the world. I've driven it once, thought I was going to die, and that was like a 3-minute drive. And my grandmother, before she moved out to the country, had given us, when my dad was out of work a few years earlier, an old 93 Holden Commodore. And that was going to be my first car. And I haven't probably mentioned it, but I've crippling anxiety. So I didn't learn to drive properly until 21, get my P's. But she gave us that car. This was like when I'm 20 in 2014. But I'm still not at the point of learning to drive because I've got crippling anxiety, uni, etc., etc. And I say to my dad, because this game's at Moore Park, and there's always like an hour of traffic to get to games at Moore Park. I don't want to take the Excel because it's not going to make the journey. Let's take the Holden. If you know the SFS and Moore Park area, we turn left onto Driver Avenue, which is like the last street before you turn into the parking. All of a sudden, car dies. 20 meters from turning into the car park. I hop a cab thinking, because there's a fuel light, and I'm going, okay, I'll hop in a cab. I'll go get a jerry can on Cleveland Street, which is probably a 5-minute walk. I stupidly take a taxi. 45 minutes and a $55 cab fare later, plus $6 of fuel, pour the fuel into the tank, car still won't go. We work out the fuel pump's dead when the NRMA gets there. We're playing Manly. NRMA rocks up, flags hanging off the car. It's a bloody Manly fan. There's only one thing worse to a South Sydney fan than a Manly fan, that's a Roosters fan. We missed the whole first half of this game while this Manly fan rubs it in. He's like, I'm not going to start working on your car until I get a photo with you guys in front of a Manly flag. I'm like, you bastard. So somewhere this guy's got a photo of us probably. We missed the whole first half. I'm watching on my, I think it was like a HTC.
We're having
Desire.
on our podcast next.
We need that photo.
Good luck finding. I don't know. I don't know if we can find him.
That's the
Man. We get in there, we beat him 23-4. Fantastic.
Hey.
Our next game at that precinct, round 26 against the Roosters. We're in the XL this time because we have no other car. We're in the XL. We missed the whole first half before we cross Southern Cross Drive because there was that much traffic going into that game. I get in there, I remember, there was, I think maybe Kane Evans or something, looked like he was held up, referee goes up, video referee, I have a try. Clearly has never got the ball to the ground, but with those calls, it's never easy. And the referees give some excuse, it's probably a try, we'll give it to him. We've been in the ground for 5 minutes. I've walked out, caught a bus back to Central because I'm that fed up. With rugby league and my life wasn't great at the time. I was finishing uni around about then. I was ropeable. This is the bullshit we got to put up with. Sorry for swearings. Bullshit we got to put up with.
I know we swear.
Everything is just going against South. This is round 26, not even the finals. It's against the Roosters. I can't stand the Roosters. Couldn't stand the stadium. I had to get out. Realized in hindsight it was an anxiety attack, but that's a whole other thing because I hadn't been diagnosed yet. So I say I'm not watching any finals games this year for South. I don't want to watch it. I can't put myself through this. Finals week 1, qualifying final, we defeat Manly 40 points to 24. Get a week off. Finals week 3, we play the Roosters, and I'm pretty sure we're down like 16-0 or something in the first few minutes. And I've put a photo on Facebook of a guy choking, getting the Heimlich maneuver, and I've coloured in the shirt to make it look like a South jersey. I went to bed. Next morning, I wake up, hey Dad, how was the game? You didn't watch? No. Now we're in the grand final. Okay. Then, to make things worse, keep in mind, remember I'm a dual member, South and Bulldogs. The Bulldogs beat the Panthers. It's the South Bulldogs grand final.
What?
I go to Belmore
What a twist.
So, me and my cousin go to Belmore, and I've got another girlfriend at the time who, like me, Bulldogs and South fan. So I'm in a South jersey jacket. She's in a Bulldogs jersey. I'm carrying a Bulldogs flag. She's carrying a South flag. So we switched. We get to about 100 meters away from the crowd at Belmore. This guy walks up to us and goes, "Bro, you got to switch flags." Why, bro? Because your girlfriend will get rolled if she's got a South flag. Okay. Switch flags. I'm on all 3 news channels the next night because these blokes come up to me, knock the South flag out of my hand, start stomping on it, and I'm shitting myself. But I was like, I've just got to go with it. They all come up to me after and go, "Bro, sorry, we just had to do it, bro. It's fine. You know, good luck on Sunday, bro. I hope you have a good game." Stay there till like 3 a.m. The next day, I've got people from uni messaging me, "Bro, you're on the news." Oh my God.
What the
I've got
hell?
Ken Sutcliffe calling me an idiot on Channel 9. I'm going, all right. I was, Anyway, we get to ANZ, and me and Dad always did all 3 games on grand final day. So it was the State Cup, probably the last, probably a 20s, and then grand final. We're sitting in the sun. I'm down to a t-shirt and shorts because it is stinking hot that day and we're in the sun. We get to the game. Everything's a blur. I have no memory of the game until one try towards the end. I think we might have been up by 14 or 16 points when this try was scored. And I was looking, and I can hear the crowd, and I have just broken down sobbing into my hands, knowing that we're probably going to win the premiership. I've collapsed onto my knees. Dad thinks I'm having a seizure. I'm hunched over the chair in front of me, just sobbing uncontrollably. I probably had heat stroke by this point, just quietly as well, from the sun. It was in that moment that 15 years of pain came out. And the thing for me was, I remember having a conversation with my mum when I started to realize mentally how bad things were with me years earlier. And I looked at her, and I don't remember why I said it. And I just said, you know, I just don't want to die without having a moment with my dad where we win the premiership. I just don't want to have that and not experience that with him. And then we win the premiership. We're singing Glory, Glory at full time, hugging everyone. And it was just like 15 years of pain just came out.
You
And
couldn't
it was
write
just-
it any better.
Wow.
I woke up the next morning with the biggest headache. I didn't get to Redfern. I didn't go to the fan day. And then I ended out on the piss the next that Monday, because it's public holiday in Sydney after grand final, normally Labor Day, for my mate's 21st or something. I didn't end up back home till 4 o'clock in my South jersey. Went back to uni the next day at like 8 o'clock for a double. I did not get much sleep.
If you
I had
could,
people that had never watched a game at NRL but knew I was a South fan coming up to me going, well done, congratulations. And I was like, I can get used to that. And then we go over to England. We beat the English champions, become World Club champions for the first time ever. We win the Auckland Nines, so we've got basically every piece of silverware. Win the Charity Shield, yeah, fantastic. Win like 10 games in a row at the start of the season, then fell apart because I think we were just so drained as a club, as fans. But that 2014 run, like, I regret not going to those games, but I was so on edge in the finals. I couldn't watch. My poor cousin was, one of my cousins was over in Canada, and she's a massive Bulldogs fan. She was a fan before the 04 grand final when they won. That's the last one they won. We sat together at 2012 when they lost to the Storm, and been through all these things. She was over in Toronto, so I set up a Skype call so she could watch the game because they didn't have the NRL over in Canada at the time. I think they do now through Rogers or something, and she said, I can't be happy for him. I can't be happy for him. I'm so upset that the Dogs haven't won. And there's a moment at the start of that 2014 grand final, the first tackle off the kickoff. Two Englishmen collide. James Graham from the Bulldogs, Sam Burgess from South. Graham's forehead goes straight into Sam Burgess's cheekbone, 9 seconds into the game, fractured face. Remember what I said about Sam Burgess? He will put his life on the line to win a premiership. Not only did he do what John Sattler did in the, God, now you're testing me, 1970 grand final, played most of the game with a busted jaw from a cheap shot. He played 79 minutes and 51 seconds of an NRL grand final as a captain of the club, basically, with a face that was completely destroyed. You want to know what South Sydney means to people, that's what you look at. You look at 80,000 people marching in the streets. You look at probably the most club members in Sydney of any club, except Parramatta are actually pretty close, in fairness to them. And thank God, because we need strong clubs in Sydney. You talk about 115 years nearly of history, and we weren't supposed to be in the NRL. We were gone. We were dead. We were buried. South Sydney are unfashionable to football, and that, ticker tape parade shut down Sydney. 21 premierships. No one's even close. Mate, that's what South Sydney is.
how would you describe them winning the premiership in one word?
Got me here. I think vindication.
Wow.
Everything
Beautiful.
we fought for and fought to prove that night. Because the Canterbury team back then, probably one of the unluckiest clubs never to win a premiership, had such talent all around the park. It was not an easy match. The funny thing was they beat us by 24 points in that prelim where Reynolds went off 32-8. We beat him 30-6 in that grand final. And in fairness to Canterbury, I think most of those points came about 65 minutes in, and the nail in the coffin on the siren, all these moments. I can't watch that game without crying, that grand final. The thing that I always go back to, and I'm getting emotional about it now, is when we were out of the comp, Dad had VHS tapes he'd recorded off air. the only South games we had to watch back then, because we didn't have Foxtel, Optus, anything like that. So South barely won anything in the 90s anyway. They won a pre-season challenge in 94, my year of birth, which is nice. But it was an 89 major semi-final against Balmain at the SFS, which funnily enough, Daniel, your mum was at.
Wow.
Because I've seen the ticket. It was the biggest crowd until the last game at the SFS, which I was also at in 2018. We lost that major semi-final. We were the minor premiers, lost the major semi-final to Balmain, lost the prelim final to Canberra. Both those teams have the greatest grand final of all time up to that point. The 89 one goes to extra time. Stephen Jackson, or as I think Rex Mossop said, or maybe it was Ian Maurice said, Peter Jackson, which is actually a brand of cigarettes, was Stephen Jackson, gets tackled 15 metres out, carries 6 blokes into the try line, grounds the ball, Canberra win the premiership, take it out of New South Wales. But that moment from the 89 grand finals probably worn out the tape, and it's the opening try to South Sydney, and the commentary won me the retro jersey in a Facebook competition a few years ago, because I could almost lip sync the moment. And I'll send you the clip and let's see if we can do it when you put the edit in. Blake this time from dummy half, long one out. Maven's got a sensational pass. What a pass. Oh, Phil Blake, take a bow. Maven's got the try. And I was like,
Wow.
That was it. That was all I ever wanted to do as a kid, was just watch that jersey again. And thankfully, March 15th, 2002, in the NRL, we got to see it again. There's no 2014 without 06. And the privatisation, I should also mention, it wasn't just Russell Crowe, it was also Peter Holmes of Court, and a lot of people who put their status on the line by supporting a privatisation bid for South. It was not an easy process. You don't have that 06 moment without coming back in 02, which is solely at the feet of people like George Piggins, who is in some ill health at the moment, has been in and out of hospital, without people like Nick Pappas, the lawyer who fought for us, Mike Whitney, Andrew Denton, those sorts of people. And you don't have that, quite frankly, without a lot of pain. But it was pain that paid off in the long run, and we are a much stronger club now. And we will never be kicked out of the competition again. We can't.
Wow.
We are just
well
too
said.
powerful.
Let me ask you this, and I know this might be a sore topic, but with everything Adam Reynolds has done for the club and him moving on next year, what do you think the future of the club is going to look like? And how do you feel about everything he's done for Rabbitohs?
I was wondering if anyone was going to ask me my top 3 South players, because they've all been from the last decade. I'd go Sam for his bravery and his sacrifice to the club. I'd say Greg Inglis for his raw talent. But there's no bigger Rabbitoh than Adam Reynolds. And that's what hurts the most about us not offering him a deal. I don't want to get too political on you, but I think there's been a bit of a shift at the club where we've maybe deviated from some of our values of loyalty and trust in building up our juniors. Adam, like me, bleeds red and green. He's one of our best players. He's now our top ever point scorer. I mean, it was a no-brainer. The club wouldn't give him what he wanted, and I understand. I hold no ill will towards him at all, but man, that's a heartbreaker to see him go.
You always have that moment, 2014 though. You always have that.
Yeah. And mate, I should give him mention as well. Poor Isaac Luke. He was a guy that we blooded in the early days of privatisation. He was a Bulldog junior from, I think, the Hulra Hawks in New Zealand. A great hooker who missed the grand final due to, injury or suspension, one of them. And Apisai Coruscant, who plays for Penrith, stood in for the grand final at hooker and did a fantastic job, but Isaac deserved that ring. Speaking of South through and through, he wasn't one of our juniors, but man, we miss him.
Well, Nate, you've taken us on an absolute journey, a journey of hardship, a journey of triumph, and a journey of victory. And it's been
vindication.
amazing. And vindication.
Honestly. And can I just say as well, because before we cut off, just because we are nearing Father's Day when this is recorded, none of this happens without my dad, and I love him to bits. And he'll always be the number one Rabbitoh in my life, and thank you for everything you gave me. He's still with us. I know I'm sounding like I'm eulogizing him, but long may you reign, George. Thank you. Cheers.
No better way to end it. Glory, glory.
Cheers to George.